I'm at the ChessBase India Chess Club. My opponent is an unrated player. He asks about the time on the clock, 5 minutes to each. I say to him, and off we go. He has the white pieces, I have the black ones, and he opens the game with one e4. c5, knight to c3, the close Sicilian. Although my opponent is not rated, you can see that he has played over the board chess from the way he makes his moves, the way he touches the pieces. Bishop b5 check. I block with the bishop. This is an important move. And I take with the queen so that I can develop my knight to c6. Now, I have my knight coming out here, the other knight will come out here, but my opponent pushes e5 and stops the knight from coming out. I first develop d3, and now I bring my knight to e7 because there I want to put it on f5. That's the plan. If you notice one small imbalance here, you will realize that my opponent's bishop is hemmed in by his own pawns, while my bishop is sort of free to move because the pawns are on light squares. So that's a very small positional advantage already there out of the opening, because my opponent exchanged the light squares, squared bishops, castles, bishop e7 played. So if you think about it, giving this check first and then pushing the pawn to e5 does not go well so much. You know, you exchange that bishop and then you push the pawn to e5, putting it on the same color as this bishop is not a good idea. Okay, now my opponent goes into deep think because he is trying to come up with a plan, and rightly so. What should he do in such a position? He goes queen e1. Not so sure what his plan is. I simply castle. And now he goes knight e2. So that's his idea. He wants to come to g3 maybe and exchange off a few pieces. I notice that when the knight is on c3, if I push, he'll come to e4. But now with the knight gone to e2, this could be a chance to actually push the pawn. Maybe not the best move there, but f6 was also something that could be thought of. There's also knight b4 in the air to attack the weakened c2 pawn. I push the pawn to d4 and limit his knights. He plays knight to g3. And now I have an option. Should I take on g3 when he'll take back with the queen, or let him take on f5 and I'll take with the pawn? It will double my pawns, but I'm okay with it. I go knight b4. Clearly understanding that I'm attacking this pawn, but I can't take it if he takes on f5, because then if I take here, he has an intermediate check. So I will have to double my pawns if my opponent takes it. But this is where I had a small thing that I had understood in the position, and that is, as long as this pawn doesn't move ahead, the bishop on c1 is passive. And so even if he takes and doubles my pawns, I'm happy because f4 pawn is fixed to its square. My opponent is thinking for a bit. Maybe somewhere queen e2 is a better move, but he takes. And now I take back. Yes, doubled pawns, but limiting the f4 pawn from moving ahead. Queen e2 played on the board. Here it's important to come up with an idea. The main plan that black should pursue is going for c4 somehow to look at these squares in the position. But how do I start? First, I play the move rook e8, because at some point if he has e6 ideas, this rook will be well placed. a3, bringing my knight back to d5. It's a beautiful square for the knight. It's looking at the f4 square, the e3 square. It's nicely placed. Next up, the plans are rook c8, b5 and c4 if possible. Also maybe knight c7 to e6. The knight will be excellently placed on e6, defending the d4 pawn. But what about my opponent? What are his plans here? He needs some air. Maybe he wants to break here with c4. So he goes bishop d2. And I bring my rook here to c8. And he rightly breaks in the center, because there he can get some counterplay. Now, if I move my knight away, my opponent is doing pretty okay. So I take en passant. Here he takes back with the pawn, and next move he wants to go c4 maybe then get his bishop out, rook here, try for the d4 break, at least get some play rolling. This is where I started to think about something which was like a positional pawn sacrifice, and I play it. My point is, if you were to take here, I want to go back with knight b6 and take on c4 here. That is my idea. So my opponent pushes on d4, but now look at my knight here on d5. It's the happiest piece on the board. It cannot be moved. It's very strong, and my plan is a5 and b4. White is definitely under some pressure, but once again my opponent here has to come up with a good idea. Knight e1, what an excellent move for someone who's unrated, because knight c2, he wants to stop the b4 plans here, and also later on exchange of my knight on d5. So a brilliant move there. a5 played, and now I want to go b4, because once I get b4, my c pawn will be a passer. He plays this knight to c2, and there's no time to waste here. So although I'm not too happy with the mass exchange that would happen on b4, I still go for it, because at the end of many lines I have this c3 intermezzo. He takes on b4, take back, and he's deciding what to take back with. He takes with the knight, maybe not the best decision. Knight e3 was the best move. Here I have a choice. Taking with the bishop was the best, because after c3, bishop e3, knight b4, I can bring back my knight. I have complete control there. But after trying to assess the position for some time, I actually take it with the knight, and that's not the best move, because after queen d4, now if bishop e3, I had seen queen e4, just sort of slightly pinning there and also having this passer. But I think bishop e3 was the best move there somehow, because bishop e3, queen e4, b5, protecting this pawn, rook b8, and he might lose it, because b6, I still have rook b6 taking the pawn. The bishop is pinned. Okay, he goes queen e3, but now it's like he's going to lose a pawn. You can see there I'm a bit surprised. Also, I have a minute extra on the clock. I take, bishop takes, and take the pawn on b4. So black is a pawn up, but white has good holding chances. He should begin with rook a4, but from here my opponent starts going wrong. He first goes rook fc1, and this allows me to sort of push the pawn now to c3. Just being careful there, because winning positions need to be played carefully. c3, pushing the pawn, bishop comes to d4, and now rook to d8. This, I attack the bishop, and already this is lost position for white. He needs to now move his bishop away. He goes bishop e3, and I push my pawn to the, yes, 7th rank. Now a very nice move would be bishop d2 next. He goes king f2, but bishop d2 is a winning move. Bishop takes, rook takes, check, the other rook moving into c3, the rook attacking g2, and this is where I should have played it. I should have taken my time here. I took my time, but I was a little bit afraid to go into a rook endgame just with a pawn. But the point is, I have a lot of positional edge. Anyway, rook d3 was played. The plan was to double the rooks on the c file. He plays it here. bd2 still is the best move, but rook c3, not bad. Bishop d2, my idea now was not to move the rook away, but to actually go in for some kind of a complicated line, which starts with bishop a3. The rook cannot move because I'll queen, so he must take my rook. I will take his rook. He will take my pawn. I will take on f4. Now I'm trying to assess this position. If we go in, bishop a3 takes, rook c2, bishop f4, and I want to take this pawn. Yes, it's a complicated position because he can go rook a2. I can't take it because there's a back rank mate, but I still go for it. Bishop a3, he takes, I take, he takes on c2, bishop f4, and now it's important to remove this rook from the pin, but he blunders, and this allows me to take another pawn, and this is all over. I am 2 pawns up in the pawn endgame, and this is quite straightforward. And he loses on time.